Okay, so I've fallen behind on my action figure openings because I've been wanting to make videos of them, and I haven't posted a lot of them on YouTube yet. So I've got a backlog of. Uh, by the time you got to this one, you've seen most of them because I've been moving and everything. So I've been like ridiculously busy, but I keep buying action figures when I find them, but I haven't really been opening them because I've been moving. So I haven't really been making videos because I've been moving. But I just got this one from Amazon today, and since I'm really excited about him, I decided to make a little time that I'm going to open up a bunch of action figures today and make a bunch of videos, and hopefully they'll be uploaded to YouTube soon. So this is G.I. Joe Classified Storm Shadow, my favorite G.I. Joe character. If people ask me, like, who's your favorite G.I. Joe, I assume they're talking about members of the G.I. Joe team. And, I've got a few favorites that could easily be considered my number one. Snake Eyes, Roadblock, Scarlet, Stalker, Flint. A lot of great characters there. I got a soft spot for Lieutenant Falcon. General Hawk's really cool. I like General Hawk. But there's a few characters I could go with there. As far as Cobra goes, probably my number one guy is Cobra Commander because he's just such a fun evil character. He's a lot of fun to read. But overall, my favorite G.I. Joe character is Storm Shadow. And I have a hard time really thinking of him as being a member of either faction because I kind of look at him as being a guy. He's on his own side. He does whatever he thinks is right. And if that means he's going to be a Cobra, he's going to be a Cobra. If that means he's going to be a Joe, he's going to be a Joe. But mainly he's got his own moral code and sense of honor, and does what he wants, does what he feels like he needs to. And in the comic book, he joined Cobra not even because like he believed in their cause or whatever. It was because he was trying to find out who killed his uncle. So he was really infiltrating the organization. He wasn't even really a member of Cobra at all. So kind of interesting that. But yeah, he wound up joining the GI Joe team later on in the series as part of their Ninja Force. But Hasbro, I guess, feels like he's more marketable as a bad guy. So ever since 2000, they've pretty much exclusively sold him as a bad guy. Even when they do figures that are supposed to be like, in his gray urban camo, which was his first, good guy costume, or the Ninja Force costume, he's still marketed as a Cobra. Like when they did the Dollar General G.I. Joes, and that Storm Shadow was in the Ninja Force costume, but he still had a Cobra stand with him. He was still marketed as a bad guy. And I believe the first classified Storm Shadow, which I'm lucky enough to have, that one is also in the Ninja Force outfit, and I believe that one is also marketed as a Cobra. Although neither of those figures have Cobra symbols on the figures, so you could still use them as, good guy versions of Storm Shadow if you wanted to. But the way that they're marketed is he's a member of Cobra. He's still like the classified figure still had the Cobra symbol in the background like we used to with this one. But this is definitely Storm Shadow when he's supposed to be in the Cobra organization. You can see the Cobra sigil on the chest. This is based on the version 1 Storm Shadow, which is the most iconic version of the character. So, of course, I am super excited to finally have this figure. Like I said, got him from Amazon the other day. And as you can see, he is in a smashed box. I did not get this as an Amazon warehouse deal. I paid full retail price for it, and they still sent it to me in a smashed box. Which, fortunately, for those of you familiar with the channel, I'm going to open them up anyway. So it's not that big a deal to me. But imagine if you were a mint on card, mint in box collector, and you received this in the mail. It would be very frustrating. Well, technically it wasn't the mail because it was from Amazon, so they have their own delivery guy. But whatever. The figure itself doesn't look to be damaged, so it's fine for my purposes. Like I said, I already had the Arctic Storm Shadow, I believe was what they called him, the Ninja Force one, and I already had the movie Storm Shadow. Like I said, he's my favorite character, so if there's a figure of Storm Shadow, I'm gonna buy it. So I'm really excited to open this guy up. Go ahead and have a look at the picture on the back, but it's the same picture that we've seen on most figures here recently. So it's a nice piece of artwork, though. Got some other nice artwork on here. I don't know why they have all these different artists and different styles. I like how this one wraps around like this. That's pretty cool. You know, it seems like they'd want to have like a consistent style, but I don't know. It is kind of interesting to see and see different takes on the G.I. Joe universe. So, and you know, some of the artwork obviously has been better than other artwork, but this one I like particularly well. You can see that there's a fairly distinct shape to these shurikens, and I was noticing that he also has those same shaped shurikens on the figure. They're pretty cool. So let's go ahead and open them up. I'm really excited. Hopefully this figure will live up to my hype. He was one that pre-orders on him sold out like instantly at pretty much every website I looked at. So while I was able to get other figures in this wave, like, you know, Spirit and the Cobra Officer, Stormy was one that I had a little bit of a hard time with. I'm going to just go ahead and grab my paintbrush and stuff. Yeah, good luck cutting tape with a paintbrush. I'm just going to go ahead and cut this tape here because I think that'll be a little easier. And we'll start taking those accessories out of the package. Stick that tape there so it's out of the way. And we have this bow. That's pretty cool. And this bow is, it does not look like the one that came with the version 1, because that's a much more simple bow. Let me get out of the way and try to just get that against the wall so you can see that a little easier. Maybe if I hold my hand up to it. It's cool looking, but it looks a lot more like the bow that came with the version 2 Storm Shadow, where it was like this compound recurve bow. It does not have the quiver attached to the bow, which I always thought was like a really cool feature of that one. But other than that, the bow looks fairly similar. And then we have this would be like the ties of his belt, which it looks more like he's got like a more of a utility belt on the figure. But I guess they still wanted to have the sash on there anyway for, you know, tradition. That's the way his belt usually looks. It's like more like a sash. And then we have an arrow for the bow. And to make this easier, the long katana. And the shorter sword. So there's a technical term for that, but I forget how to pronounce it, so I'm not even going to try. And then we have a hood, and of course, Storm Shadow's iconic backpack, which this is very consistent with how the backpack has looked since 25th anniversary, and obviously based very much on the backpack that came with the version 1 Storm Shadow. So we'll set that aside for now. And last but not least, Storm Shadow himself. We will take him out of the package. No rubber bands, no plastic tabs. He just fits snugly into the plastic tray, and I was able to get him out very easily. So kudos to Hasbro for doing that. Alright, so I can already tell this guy is loaded with articulation, and he's got some articulation that we don't even normally see on G.I. Joe Classified. So let's go ahead and have a look at all the features on this bad boy. And I think this just looking at him just straight away, and I don't want to oversell this, I think this might be the best Classified figure yet. And like I said, Storm Shadow is my favorite character. So if I might be a tad biased as far as that goes, but man, I'm just looking over this guy and check out some of the detail on this figure. Like, hopefully it'll come through on the camera. Since it is a white figure, some of the detail might get washed out, but in addition to like all the wrinkling and everything that we've come to expect in the fabric, and there's like, a slight fabric texture, not as extreme as in some figures, but like if I rub my fingernail over it, like I can feel it. I know that's not going to show up on the camera because the white's gonna wash it out, but trust me, it's there. He's got the wraps are a light gray instead of white, which I would probably prefer that they were like an even lighter color and just kind of more like an off-white than a true gray. But it's nice that they gave him a little bit of extra paint detailing. So let's talk about some of the differences between this version and the version 1 figure, which it's heavily based off of, but they have made some changes. And if you're a total purist, you might have some complaints, but I think most people are going to be fine with the changes that were made to this figure, especially for like a more modern version. So he does have the wraps around the forearm, like the original version had, but you can tell that he also has gloves, and I like that this is more of an archery glove, where like it's just got the glove just covers the first 2 fingers, the ones that you would use to pull back your bow. But the second 2 fingers, like the pinky and the ring finger, those are both unclad. So that's a nice little touch there. It's Storm Shadow is supposed to be an unparalleled master of the bow and arrow, and I think the only person in the G.I. Joe universe that is at least equal to Storm Shadow as far as archery skills, maybe even better, would be Zartan. So I think Larry Hama might have said at some point that Zartan was even better with a bow and arrow than Storm Shadow, but I could be mistaken. So, but yeah, that's in terms of like Snake Eyes versus Storm Shadow and their skill sets. Snake Eyes is supposed to be Storm Shadow's superior as far as like edged weapons, swords, knives, things like that. But nobody can beat Storm Shadow when it comes to the bow, except, like I said, maybe Zartan. He's at least almost as good. The other hand, you can see this hand is sculpted to be a hand that is doing the bow and arrow thing, which I think is really cool. And this other hand, you can see has a trigger finger. Now, he doesn't come with a gun, because Storm Shadow usually doesn't come with guns. I think there were some in the 2002 line that did, but like 90% of the time, Storm Shadow doesn't come with a gun. But if you did want to give him a gun and have him holding a gun for whatever reason, you could do that with his hand. He could hold a gun in his left hand. And I figure Storm Shadow is probably like a dude who's trained himself to be ambidextrous anyway. So I'm messing around with the articulation while I look at this figure. So I want to look at the I want to try to take a serious look at the articulation. I know I gloss over it a lot of times, but I want to take a serious look at it because he does have a couple of extra points that most figures don't have. So first of all, the head joint got a lot of good articulation there. You can look way up and way down. The hood's kind of hindering him looking down, but you can also remove the hood if you want. So obviously the version 1 didn't have a hood at all. It just had like a traditional ninja mask. So if you wanted a slightly more traditional look, then you could remove that. And once I take that off, like, dude, that just brought memories flooding back to me of Mike Zeck's drawings of Storm Shadow in the comics. Speaking of which, he does have the shoulders that are kind of flared out here on his shirt. which is very similar to how he was drawn in both the comic books and the cartoon. That's another difference with the V1 figure, though, is because the V1 figure had short sleeves. But usually in most media, Storm Shadow was depicted with bare arms, and the shoulders of his gi just kind of flared out a little bit like that. So that's another difference. And he's got black soles on his feet, which the original one just had plain white feet. And he's got cool ninja toes there, like the bird toe looking shoes. So and there are a lot of kind of superfluous seams and things around the pants especially, that this probably aren't really necessary. It probably wouldn't really be on pants at all, but it's like a movie costume. You want to add some surface detail to it, so they put all these seams in there where they don't really need to go. So I'm going to go ahead and take the ties of the belt, and they go on this little plug here on the back of the belt. And like I said, it's kind of strange to have this on here, because the belt itself, you can see if you look closely, there's like pouches and things on here. Like this isn't a sash type belt. This is very much of a utility belt, like Batman would wear or something like that. So you would think it would buckle, but no, it's like I guess it's supposed to be like a sash belt that just has pouches on it, which to me is strange. So I also took that hood off for another reason, is we got this other hood to put onto him, and I think that's just supposed to go straight over his head. Voila. And it does not reach all the way down to his shoulders, and I kind of feel like you have to have it kind of tilted forward like that, because you want it to look like it's attached to the shirt. But I think they made it a little short as far as that goes. But it's nice to have a hood as like an extra accessory. I just think they made it a little undersized. So let's go ahead and put his backpack on. And you can see that there's a little hole through the strap on the back. So you can put the backpack through that hole, and it gives it the illusion that it's part of that strap. But also, I think you could kind of just move the strap out of the way and put it straight into his back, if you preferred. And I'm not sure which one would be more stable at this point, but I'm going to go ahead and put it in the way that it was obviously intended to go in. And let's go ahead and put his ninja swords in his hand, because I figure this is going to be the way that a lot of people display them, and it went in his hand fairly easily. The ninja swords, the handle of it, obviously, like a true ninja sword, is going to be narrower on one end and wider on the other end. So you can just kind of rotate that into his hand. This one's a little tighter, probably because it's only got the trigger finger out instead of the two fingers for the archery. But there he is with both of his swords, and I'm sure we can get him into some really cool ninja fighting positions. He's got the butterfly joints, which are pretty standard on G.I. Joe Classified, but I think these even have a greater range of motion. And I wonder if we could get him into a two-handed sword pose. Let's see if we can do that. Now, the handle of the sword, the hilt of the sword, I should say, that's the technical term, is a little bit shorter than I would like, but I think it's still long enough that I can get both hands around it. Like so. So you can get a two-handed pose out of this fairly easily. You can even extend the arms a little bit, I think. So there we go. That looks pretty cool. And then, of course, The swords each have a sheath on the back, so we can put the swords into his backpack. And they do, you can see, taper off to an angle at the bottom, so there is a clear way that the swords are supposed to go in there. Sometimes with these sheaths, like, they'll just be flat at the bottom, and you can just put it in there whichever way. Sometimes it'll be curved, so that way, you know which way it's supposed to go in there. But in this case, it's pointy at the bottom, so we put the point facing the right way. So the tail of the shirt is a separate piece, and you probably see it like moving around when I'm messing around with the figure. And if we look at it underneath, there is another white belt on the pants, and I figure that's just a belt that holds his pants up. So there we go. I want to take a second and admire this head sculpt. Let's take a look at the head sculpt. And again, since it's a white figure, it's washing out a lot of the detail on the camera, but there's seams in there like what we see in the comic book a lot of the times. Lots of wrinkles in there. It's a good looking head sculpt. To me, that's a pretty definitive Storm Shadow head sculpt. That's one of the better ones I've seen. Good job with the eyes and the eyebrows. Gives it a very intense look. He's a guy who obviously means business. So, last but not least, I want to go ahead and put the bow and arrow in his hand and see if we can get some good archery poses out of him. Like I said, I'm very happy that they specifically gave him this hand that can hold the arrow in the proper way. But it's always tricky to me getting action figures to hold a bow and arrow properly. And since it's got the string sculpted in there in terms of plastic, it's not going to look realistic because he's not actually pulling the string back. But I'm sure a lot of clever customizers out there have already figured out ways to remove the plastic string and put like an elastic cord on there or something like that. And you'll notice that there is an art, like a little clip on the bow and arrow, or on the bow, I should say, that can hold the arrow. So it's very easy to display him with the arrow out like that. But let's see if we can get him at least posed so that he's pulling back on this arrow. I feel like the arrow is maybe a little bit short. That's something you see a lot of times in action figures. But I want to see if I can at least get him into a cool position where he looks like he's pulling the bow back. Even if he's not pulling the string with it, but it's a toy, we'll use our imagination. We'll pretend like he is actually pulling the string back. And I think I might have to tilt this just slightly in the hand that's holding the bow. And you can fit the arrow. Whoops. That's not the way you're supposed to shoot the arrow, Storm Shadow. You're a master archer. You should do it better. You're embarrassing yourself in front of all these kind people watching my video. But yeah, you can fit the arrow like right in between the fingertips here. And there we go. That looks pretty decent, don't you think? So maybe if the arrow were a little bit longer, and I feel like it should be a little bit longer, I could probably have him holding the bow a bit closer to his torso. Have it more sort of lined up eye level. But it is what it is. And maybe somebody can do a better job with that than I can. Who knows? So, but overall, oh wait, one more thing I want to show off before we get into that. There actually is a small hole here on the backpack, so we can put the arrow in there. And look at that. Not only does it fit snugly once you get it all the way in, down at the bottom, but the fletchings of the arrow, that is really cool. It lines up perfectly with the fletchings of the arrow that are already sculpted into the backpack. So it just fits right in. Now, unfortunately, you can see that while they painted the just the fletchings on the side of the loose arrow and the shaft is still black, they actually painted the whole fletchings and shaft red on the arrows in the backpack. But you can probably fix that yourself. Just do a little bit of extra painting or whatever if you want to make that look a little more consistent. But I think most people probably wouldn't care. But you could probably paint like the whole fletching of the arrow red, or paint in the black shaft parts on the backpack. So I wonder if there's a way we can store the bow. I bet there is. Ah, look at this. There's a little tab here on the back. So I bet there's a section somewhere here where we can just plug that in. So I'm looking for like a little notch. A little notch anywhere. Maybe it's just supposed to go through this little hole here. That one right there. Let's see if that'll work. Yep, that works perfectly. And now that I get it plugged in there, I can see that it's actually that same sort of trapezoidal shape. So, yep, that's exactly what you're intended to do. So, Storm Shadow can store all of his weapons on his backpack, just like the original figure. And in fact, I think that works a little better than how the old one used to open up like a briefcase and you put the bow inside of it. Obviously, you wouldn't be able to do that with this one because this is a much more realistically sized bow, and the backpack is much smaller, so it would not fit inside of it. So I think having the little tab that it fits over, that is a good solution to this problem. So, oh man, what do I think of this figure? This is a great action figure. This is just a terrific, fantastic. I can't say enough nice things about how great this action figure is. I'm really impressed with it. And yeah, I think that this might be, in my opinion, the best G.I. Joe classified action figure so far. Which to me means that it beats the heavy artillery roadblock, the one that looks like the version 1 roadblock. This one's even better than that one. So man, I can't wait to have those two guys fight, and Roadblock actually kicks his ass. Yeah, because like it's one of those things where, like, yeah, I could see Storm Shadow giving Roadblock a hard time until Roadblock gets his hands on him. Because let's face it, he might be a ninja master, but Roadblock's got like maybe like 2 feet of height and like a couple of 100 pounds of muscle on this guy. he's massive. So yeah, once he gets his hands on Storm Shadow, that's it. It's done. But yeah, this is a great figure. I highly recommend it. This is a figure that if you're collecting G.I. Joe classified figures, you need to have Storm Shadow. He's an essential character. He's a character that you cannot avoid having. And this is the definitive look for Storm Shadow. This is the iconic look for Storm Shadow. This is what, when you think of Storm Shadow, this is what you think of. And, I like the Ninja Force figure. I'm a sucker for the Ninja Force version of Storm Shadow. It's one that I like quite a bit besides this one. The movie version of Storm Shadow, it's not bad. For like a movie figure, it's good. I wish that one had like more of a pure white outfit than the kind of weird off-white that they decided to go with on it. And the unmasked head is a really good likeness of the actor, and I enjoyed that actor as Storm Shadow. I might not have been that big a fan of that movie, but I thought he was really good in the part. And if I ever watch it again, it'll probably be because I liked him as Storm Shadow. But this one blows both of those out of the water. It's you don't need to have the Ninja Force version of Storm Shadow. He's not as essential as this one. If you're like me, you want to have that version, and I'm glad I do. But you know, if you missed out on that one, you can get this one right now for a pretty decent price. Like I was able to get him, like I said, for just regular retail. He might still be available on Amazon for regular retail. But even if you paid a premium for this guy, like 30 or 40 bucks, you're getting your money's worth. He's a great figure. So, but I probably wouldn't pay that much. He's going to be one I think is going to be pretty easy to find once all the furor dies down. And I'll probably wind up getting a couple of extras of this guy because I think he'd be good for customs. I know I wanted some bare arms for classified figures so that I could do dreadnoks and things like that. So I'll probably wind up buying a few of them just for the arms, you know. But there's all kinds of different customs you can do with Storm Shadow figure. Like obviously you could paint him red and make yourself a nice red ninja figure or something like that. So, you know, it's not like I'm gonna have a hard time figuring out what to do with the rest of the Storm Shadow parts after I use those arms. Anyway, I've spent a half an hour talking about this figure, but he's that great. It was worth spending the time going over how awesome this figure is. If I had one complaint, it's that I think the Cobra sigil on the shirt is a little small. But if you look at the way that the articulation is with the butterfly joint, there's not a whole lot of room for it. So I think they did the best they could. So overall, I'm going to give this figure a 10. This is a perfect interpretation of my favorite character from one of my favorite franchises, and I can't say enough nice things about it. If my only real criticism is his emblem is too small, you know they did a good job. So anyway, that's it for this episode. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe and all the fun YouTube stuff down below. Let me know what you think about this Storm Shadow figure and the character of Storm Shadow in general. I really love the silent issue of G.I. Joe, and I think most fans do. And loved it when we got to the last page, and you saw the wrappings falling off of his arm, and you saw how Snake Eye's shirt was torn, and they both had the same tattoo. And you're like, oh my god, these guys are linked. They probably even know each other. And, and you know, it was just the start of this epic journey with this character who would soon become one of my favorite characters in fiction. Again, this is not a show made for kids, so I'm going to say this. I think about, when I think about Storm Shadow, I think about how Christian Slater described Sonny Chiba in True Romance as he's not so much a good guy or a bad guy as he's a bad motherfucker. So yeah, that is my review of one of my favorite figures now, of one of my favorite characters of all time. I hope you enjoyed it. We'll talk to you next time. Bye.